She dumped me the day I got laid off, saying she can't date an unemployed loser. What she didn't know was I had a $200,000 severance and a better job ready. 6 weeks later, she asked for a second chance. My reply ended everything. I still remember the exact sound my phone made when it vibrated on my desk that morning, because when something ends your life as you know it, your brain records useless details like evidence. It was a Thursday, just after 10, the part of the morning where nothing important is supposed to happen. I was half listening to a coworker complain about a client while staring at a spreadsheet that hadn't changed in 10 minutes, when my manager's name popped up asking me to come to the conference room. I felt it before I thought it. That quiet tightening in your chest that has nothing to do with anxiety and everything to do with instinct. I didn't panic. I didn't even rush. I grabbed my notebook, stood up, and walked down the hall, already knowing that whatever was waiting for me wasn't good. The conference room door was open. HR was already inside. That was enough. When HR shows up before you do, the meeting is already over. They used all the right words: restructuring, market conditions, strategic shift. They said my role was being eliminated, not me. Like that distinction was supposed to matter. 8 years with the company, reduced to a conversation that didn't last longer than my lunch break. I nodded, asked the practical questions, signed where I needed to sign, and listened while they explained the severance package. And here's the part most people don't expect. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even shocked. I'd seen it coming. Not the date, not the exact hour, but the direction. Contracts had been slipping for months. Budgets were shrinking. My direct supervisor had quietly left 2 months earlier without a big announcement. When people above you jump ship quietly, they know something you don't. I'd been preparing, updating my resume late at night, talking to recruiters, taking interviews on long lunch breaks. I even had a verbal offer lined up from a competitor for a senior role. Better title, better team, 35% more money at least. I was waiting for the official offer letter before giving notice. That's the irony. I walked out of that building at noon carrying a cardboard box, but I wasn't unemployed in the way people imagine. I had savings. I had options. I had a future that just hadn't fully arrived yet. On the drive home, I called my girlfriend. 18 months together. Long enough to talk about moving in. Long enough to meet each other's families. Long enough that the word future didn't feel hypothetical. She answered sounding distracted, like she was multitasking. I told her I'd been laid off. There was a pause on the line that lasted a second too long. Not shock, not concern, calculation. Then her voice changed. Flat. Controlled. She said she couldn't do this. When I asked what she meant, she said she couldn't be with someone who didn't have their life together. Someone who couldn't provide stability. I tried to explain. Told her it was a layoff, that it happens, that I had savings and something lined up. She cut me off, said she'd been thinking about this anyway, that she needed someone established, someone successful. Then she said it, like it was obvious. Unemployed loser, not shouted, not whispered, just stated. Then she hung up. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 10 minutes without moving, not crying, not yelling, just sitting there with my hands on the steering wheel, replaying the call in my head, trying to understand how 18 months could disappear in 3 minutes because a paycheck paused. When I finally drove home, I cracked a beer out of pure habit and opened my laptop. That's when I saw the email. The official offer letter. Start date 6 weeks out. Senior role. 40% higher compensation once everything was broken down. I stared at the screen and laughed, not because it was funny, but because the timing was almost cruel in how perfect it was. That night, I called a friend from college who works in finance. We talked for hours. By the end of the call, I had a plan. I used part of the severance to pay off my car loan completely, cleared my credit cards, put a chunk into a high-yield savings account, invested the rest in a diversified portfolio with his guidance. What could have been a crisis turned into a cushion. 16 weeks of severance, plus my savings, meant those 6 weeks before the new job weren't scary. They were quiet. For the first time in years, I wasn't burnt out. I slept. I worked out. I read. I interviewed with 2 more companies just to test my market value and realized I'd been underestimating myself for a long time. Word got back to me that my ex was telling people I was broke and spiraling, painting herself as practical, responsible, the woman who had to walk away from a sinking ship. Her own friends weren't buying it. By week 5, I bought a new car. Nothing flashy. A certified pre-owned Tesla Model 3. Something I'd wanted for years and could finally justify. Paid for it outright. Drove it around with the windows down like a teenager. Felt good. Not in a petty way. In a calm, earned way. The day she saw me outside a coffee shop was pure accident, at least for me. I pulled in, parked, stepped out, and saw her sitting at an outdoor table with her sister. She saw the car first, then me. Her face did something complicated all at once. Shock, regret, panic, hope. I nodded politely and went inside. When I came back out, she stopped me, complimented the car, asked how I was doing, asked what I was doing now. When I told her about the new job, her expression cracked. That's when she reached for my arm and said she believed in second chances. And that was the moment I realized she didn't miss me. She missed the version of me she thought she could benefit from again. When I told her no, calmly and clearly, something inside her snapped. The apologies turned into persistence. The persistence turned into entitlement. The entitlement turned into escalation. Texts at night, calls from new numbers, showing up where I was. She couldn't accept that the door was closed because, in her mind, it wasn't supposed to be. She'd walked away assuming I'd still be there if she changed her mind. That's how she saw relationships. Conditional, transactional, safe as long as the benefits outweighed the inconvenience. By the time she showed up at my workplace and tried to reinsert herself into my life like nothing had happened, I knew this wasn't about love or regret. It was about control. About losing something she thought she owned access to. When HR called me in to ask about a complaint she'd made, accusing me of harassment while she was the one contacting me nonstop, something shifted permanently. This wasn't messy emotions anymore. This was behavior. I documented everything. The texts, the calls, the surprise appearances. When she started waiting in my apartment parking lot, sitting in her car like patience would wear me down, I called it what it was. When she followed me to lunch spots and demanded closure, I stopped engaging. When she showed up uninvited to a poker night with my friends, knocking on my door like she still belonged there, I finally understood that ignoring it wasn't enough. Filing for a protection order wasn't revenge. It was clarity. It was acknowledging that someone who dumps you at your lowest doesn't get to force their way back in when you're doing better. Sitting in that courtroom, watching her try to frame obsession as love, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not satisfaction. Not joy. Relief. Like I was finally standing on the right side of my own life. When the judge granted the order and told her to stay away from me, it felt like a chapter closing the way it was supposed to have closed months earlier. Quietly. Decisively. No drama required. That night, I went home, ordered pizza, and sat on my couch in silence. No buzzing phone, no unexpected knocks, just peace. And that's when it hit me. The real revenge wasn't the new job or the car or the salary bump. It was the fact that I'd learned my worth wasn't tied to my employment status or someone else's approval. She couldn't see that. And because she couldn't, she lost access to me entirely. The quiet after the judge spoke felt heavier than any argument I'd had in the months leading up to that moment. When she was told to stay away from me, when the words 1-year protection order were read out loud, like they were just another administrative detail, something finally loosened in my chest. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. Like I had reached the end of a hallway I'd been forced to walk down and could finally turn the light off behind me. She stood there stunned, eyes darting between the judge and her lawyer, like she was still waiting for someone to explain how this had happened to her. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back because I already knew what I'd see if I did: confusion, entitlement, and the slow realization that this time she couldn't talk her way out of consequences. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different, cleaner. My friend clapped me on the shoulder and asked if I was okay. I told him I was, and for the first time in weeks, that wasn't a lie I told myself to get through the day. We stood there for a minute, watching people come and go, all of them wrapped up in their own lives, their own problems, none of them aware that something fundamental had shifted for me inside that building. I drove home alone, windows down, no music on, just letting my thoughts finally settle into something resembling order. That night was the first night in a long time where my phone didn't buzz with a new number or an unexpected message. No guilt-laced apologies. No accusations disguised as concern. No "we need to talk" texts sent at midnight. Just silence. And I realized how loud the noise had been before it stopped. How much energy I'd been burning simply reacting. When that stopped, there was space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to actually process what I'd been through instead of just surviving it. Over the next few days, life started doing something strange. It went back to normal. Not the old normal, but a quieter, sturdier version. I went to work, dove into my new role, and realized how much I'd underestimated what it feels like to be somewhere you're genuinely valued. My new team didn't treat me like I was disposable. My ideas were listened to. My experience mattered. The contrast hit me hard. It wasn't just that I had a better job. It was that I finally saw how much I'd been tolerating before, both professionally and personally. People talk about glow-ups like they're about appearances or money. That wasn't it. What changed was my posture, not physically, but internally. I stopped shrinking. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped feeling the need to justify decisions that protected me. When coworkers asked about my past role, I answered honestly without bitterness. When friends asked what happened with my ex, I told the truth without embellishment and without shame. She dumped me the day I was laid off. When she realized I was doing better than before, she tried to come back. I said no. That was enough. Anyone who mattered understood immediately. A week after the hearing, I got an email from HR confirming everything had been documented, that the complaint filed against me was officially closed, and that any further attempts by her to contact the company would be handled directly by legal. Seeing that in writing felt like locking a door from the inside. Another layer of protection. Another line drawn clearly where it should have been from the start. Her mother tried once more. An email this time, sent from an account I didn't recognize but didn't need to guess at. It talked about forgiveness, about misunderstandings, about how her daughter was struggling, and not herself. I read it once and deleted it without replying. I wasn't angry. I wasn't tempted. I was done negotiating reality with people who only accepted it when it benefited them. Some bridges don't need to be burned. They just need to be left behind. What surprised me was how the anger faded. Not all at once, but steadily, like a fever breaking. I'd expected to feel vindicated, maybe even smug. Instead, I felt calm. Calm because I'd learned something important about myself. I'd learned that being laid off didn't define me. That being rejected didn't make me smaller. That being discarded revealed more about the person doing the discarding than the one being left behind. I stopped replaying the phone call where she called me an unemployed loser. The words lost their power once I stopped measuring myself by someone else's fear. A couple of weeks later, I went on a coffee date with someone new. No expectations, no story to sell. We talked about work, but not salaries. About hobbies, not resumes. About where we wanted to travel, not what we owned. She didn't ask what car I drove, didn't flinch when I mentioned being laid off earlier in the year, didn't frame my life as a checklist she needed to approve. That alone felt revolutionary. When I got home that night, I realized I was smiling for a reason that had nothing to do with proving anything to anyone. I thought a lot about the version of me who sat in that parking garage the day everything fell apart. The guy gripping the steering wheel, wondering how fast his life could unravel. If I could talk to him now, I wouldn't tell him to stay strong or that everything happens for a reason. I'd tell him something simpler, that this moment, as brutal as it feels, is stripping away something that was never meant to stay. That being chosen only when you're convenient isn't being chosen at all. That losing people who only value you for what you provide is a strange kind of win. Every once in a while, someone would ask if I felt bad about how things ended, about the protection order, about not giving her another chance. The answer never changed. I gave her a chance when I picked up the phone on the worst day of my career and trusted her with the truth. She told me exactly who she was in that moment. I believed her. Everything that came after was just her trying to undo the consequences of that choice once the outcome didn't suit her anymore. The funny thing is, if she'd never tried to come back, if she'd just walked away and let it end there, this story might have faded into a quiet what if. But entitlement has a way of exposing itself when it's denied access. The escalation wasn't about love. It was about control slipping through her fingers. And when that happens, people reveal parts of themselves they usually keep hidden. Months later, my life doesn't look dramatic from the outside. I go to work. I come home. I cook dinner. I see friends. I make plans. But there's a steadiness now that wasn't there before. A sense that I'm no longer auditioning for someone else's approval, that I don't need to be perfect, just present, capable, grounded, and that's more than enough. The last thing I ever heard about her came secondhand through a mutual acquaintance. She told people she dodged a bullet, that I changed, that success had made me cold. I laughed when I heard that, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. It's easier to rewrite the story than to accept your role in it. I didn't correct it. I didn't need to. The people who mattered already knew the truth, and the rest were never my audience to begin with. I closed this chapter without a dramatic ending, without a final message sent into the void, without a victory speech. I closed it by living well, by choosing peace, by refusing to let someone who measured love in paychecks have any more access to my time or my mind. That's not revenge. That's self-respect, finally catching up with reality. And if there's one thing this whole experience taught me, it's this. When someone leaves the moment, life gets uncomfortable. Don't chase them. Let them go. Let them walk right out of the story they don't deserve to finish with you. The people meant to stay won't need proof of your worth. They'll already see it, even when everything else is uncertain. That's where it ends for me. Not with bitterness, not with applause, just with clarity. If you like this story, let me know in the comments what you thought. And if you want more real powerful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe.